The crystal chandeliers of Aurelio's cast golden light across white tablecloths, and the city's elite. Isabella Romano sat perfectly still at table 12, her hands folded in her lap beneath the linen napkin, her spine straight despite the weight pressing down on her chest. She'd learned years ago how to disappear in plain sight, how to make herself small, even in designer dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Across from her, her husband Matteo Romano, the man who controlled half of Chicago's underground operations, was laughing. But not with her. Never with her anymore. Scarlett Voss leaned close to him, her red lips curved in a smile that suggested ownership. Her hand rested possessively on Matteo's arm, her fingers trailing along the expensive fabric of his suit jacket. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Not from the restaurant full of witnesses, not from the society wives pretending not to notice, and certainly not from Isabella. "Mrs. Romano, would you care for more wine?" The server's voice was gentle, pitying. Everyone knew. The whole city knew that Matteo Romano's wife sat at his table like a ghost, while his mistress played the role that should have been hers. "No, thank you," Isabella said softly, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her throat. "If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." She watched Matteo whisper something in Scarlett's ear, watched the younger woman throw her head back and laugh with theatrical delight. Isabella knew that laugh. It was calculated, practiced, designed to make men feel powerful and clever. She'd once made similar sounds, back when Matteo had courted her with flowers and promises, back when she believed that marrying him meant partnership rather than disappearance. That was 6 years ago. She'd been 26, fresh from completing her MBA, working at her family's modest import-export business. Matteo had walked into her office like he owned the building, which she'd later learned he actually did through a shell corporation, and swept her into a whirlwind courtship that had felt like destiny. Her parents had been thrilled. The Romanos were old money, legitimate on the surface with deep roots in Chicago's Italian community. What her parents hadn't known, what Isabella herself had been naive enough not to see, was that the Romano fortune was built on blood and fear, that Matteo's business dealings involved everything from illegal gambling to drug trafficking to murder. By the time she'd understood the truth, they were already married. And by then, she'd learned the first rule of being a mafia wife. You don't ask questions, you don't make demands, and you certainly don't leave. "Isabella, darling," Matteo's voice cut through her thoughts. He was looking at her now, his dark eyes holding a warning she'd learned too. Recognize. "You're being very quiet tonight. Are you unwell?" It was a performance for the other diners, a show of husbandly concern that meant nothing. She could see Scarlett's hand still resting on his thigh beneath the table. "I'm fine," she said, meeting his gaze. "Just tired." "Perhaps you should go home then," Scarlett suggested, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We wouldn't want you to overtax yourself." The audacity of it stole Isabella's breath. Here was her husband's mistress, sitting at their table in a restaurant they'd celebrated their anniversary at just 2 years ago, suggesting that the wife should leave. But what shocked her more was that Matteo said nothing. He didn't correct Scarlett, didn't defend his wife, didn't even seem to register the inappropriateness of the moment. He just sipped his wine and checked his phone, as if Isabella's humiliation was simply background noise to his evening. Something cracked inside her chest then, not dramatically, not with the explosive force of anger, but quietly, like ice beginning to fracture under pressure. 6 years of small humiliations, of being overlooked and undervalued, of watching herself disappear inch by inch, and this was the moment when something fundamental shifted. "Actually," Isabella said, her voice stronger now, "I think I'll stay. I'm quite comfortable here." Scarlett's eyes narrowed. Matteo's attention snapped back to his wife, and Isabella saw surprise flicker across his face. She never challenged him, never made scenes, never did anything that might draw attention or cause embarrassment. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the way Scarlett's hand possessed what should have been Isabella's. Maybe it was the pitying looks from the other diners. Maybe it was simply that she'd reached the bottom of how small she could make herself and found there was nowhere left to go. "Isabella," Matteo said quietly, his tone carrying an edge of warning. "Don't." "Don't what?" she asked, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Don't sit at a table in a public restaurant with my husband? Don't exist in the same space as your—" She paused, looking at Scarlett with deliberate coldness. "Companion?" Scarlett's face flushed with anger. How dare you? How dare I? Isabella's laugh was bitter. How dare I sit at a table with my own husband? How dare I expect basic respect in my own marriage? Matteo's jaw tightened. Around them, conversations were dying as people turned to watch. This was exactly the kind of scene he hated, the kind of public spectacle that suggested he didn't have complete control over his household. "We'll discuss this at home," he said through gritted teeth. "No," Isabella said, and the word felt like freedom and terror combined. "We'll discuss it now. Or better yet, we won't discuss it at all. Because there's nothing left to discuss, is there, Matteo? You've made your choice very clear." Scarlett stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by some bitter, boring housewife who can't keep her husband interested." The words landed like slaps. Isabella felt her face burn, felt the eyes of every diner in Aurelio's on her, watching to see how she'd respond. This was her moment of ultimate humiliation, being called boring and inadequate by her husband's mistress while he sat silent. But then Scarlett did something that changed everything. She reached across the table, her hand moving so fast Isabella barely registered it, and slapped her. The crack of palm against cheek echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant. Isabella's head snapped to the side, pain blooming across her face. For a moment, she just sat there, stunned, her hand rising to touch her burning cheek. And Matteo did nothing. He sat there, his expression flickering between shock and something that might have been anger, but he didn't move, didn't stand up, didn't defend his wife. He just looked at Scarlett with what appeared to be annoyance at the scene she was creating, not horror at what she'd done. That was when Isabella understood with perfect, terrible clarity she meant nothing to him. Not her dignity, not her safety, not even her basic humanity. She was less important than avoiding a scene, less valuable than keeping his mistress happy. The fracture inside her chest split completely. She stood slowly, with all the grace her mother had taught her, and picked up her clutch. She didn't look at Matteo or Scarlett. She simply turned and walked toward the restaurant's exit, her heels clicking against marble floors, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. She'd made it halfway across the dining room when she heard Scarlett's voice, loud enough to carry, "Good riddance. At least now we can enjoy our dinner without the dead weight." Isabella paused, her hand on the brass door handle. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, to preserve what little dignity she had left. But something new had been born in that moment when Scarlett's hand had connected with her face, something that refused to disappear quietly. She turned back, and in that moment, the restaurant's entrance doors opened behind her. A man walked in, and the atmosphere in Aurelio's changed instantly. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested both power and precision. His dark suit was expensive but understated, and his eyes, cold, gray, calculating, swept the room with professional assessment before landing on Isabella. "Mrs. Romano," he said, his voice deep and carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. "I apologize for the delay. Traffic was worse than anticipated." Isabella stared at him, confused. She'd never seen this man before in her life, but Matteo had recognized him. She saw her husband's face go pale, saw him half rise from his seat. "Dimitri," he said, and there was something in his voice Isabella had never heard before. Fear. The man, Dimitri, moved to Isabella's side with the fluid grace of someone trained in violence. He looked at her cheek, at the angry red mark Scarlett's hand had left, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. Isabella glanced back at her table, where Scarlett was now looking uncertain, and Matteo was very deliberately not making eye contact with Dimitri. "It doesn't matter," Isabella said, though she didn't understand what was happening. "I was just leaving." "It matters very much," Dimitri replied. His hand moved to the small of her back, not touching but hovering there protectively. "Your father was very clear about what would constitute an emergency requiring my intervention. Physical assault qualifies." Understanding crashed over Isabella like cold water. Her father had hired a bodyguard without telling her, had been watching, had known something she hadn't, that she might need protection not from Matteo's enemies, but from Matteo himself. Matteo was standing now, and other men around the restaurant were shifting, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Isabella recognized them, Matteo's men, always present, always watching. The entire restaurant was suddenly tense with the promise of violence. "Dimitri," Matteo said, his voice carefully controlled. This is a private matter between me and my wife. It doesn't concern you. Mrs. Romano's safety is precisely my concern, Dimitri replied. His voice never rose, but it carried absolute authority. Mr. Romano, I suggest you and your companion remain seated while Mrs. Romano and I depart. You forget yourself, Matteo said, his face darkening with anger. You forget who I am in this city. I forget nothing, Dimitri said. I know exactly who you are, and you should know exactly who I work for. The emphasis on the last word made Matteo freeze. Isabella saw the calculation in her husband's eyes, saw him weighing options and coming to some conclusion that made his jaw clench with suppressed rage. This isn't over, Matteo said. No, Dimitri agreed. It's not. But tonight, it's over. Mrs. Romano is leaving, and you're going to let her go without interference. Am I clear? For a long, terrible moment, Isabella thought Matteo might refuse. She saw his pride warring with whatever fear Dimitri's presence inspired, but finally, slowly, he sat back down. Scarlett grabbed his arm. Matteo, you can't just let her— Be quiet, he snapped, shaking her off. His eyes were still on Dimitri, filled with a hatred Isabella had never seen directed at anyone who'd lived to tell about it. Dimitri guided Isabella toward the door with professional courtesy. As they passed tables, she heard the whispers starting, saw the phones being raised to capture this moment. By morning, everyone in their circle would know that Matteo Romano's wife had walked out of Aurelio's under the protection of another man after being struck by his mistress. The humiliation of the slap was nothing compared to this public demonstration that Matteo didn't control his own household, that his wife needed protection from someone other than him. Outside, the Chicago night was cool and clear. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, and Dimitri opened the rear door for her. Where are we going? Isabella asked, her voice shaking despite her attempts at composure. Wherever you need to go, Mrs. Romano, Dimitri said. Your father arranged for a safe house, but that's only if you wish to use it. I can also take you to your family's home, to a hotel, anywhere you feel secure. Isabella looked back at Aurelio's, at the soft golden light spilling from its windows, at the life she'd been trying to fit herself into for 6 years. Then she looked at Dimitri, at this stranger her father had sent to protect her. The safe house, she said finally. Take me to the safe house. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Isabella watched the restaurant recede in the side mirror. She could see Matteo standing at the window now, his silhouette dark against the light, watching her leave. She touched her cheek where Scarlett had struck her, felt the heat still radiating from the mark. That slap had been the catalyst, the final moment of degradation that had shattered whatever remained of her acceptance. But what came next, she had no idea. All she knew was that the woman who'd walked into Aurelio's that evening, the quiet, obedient, slowly disappearing wife, was gone. What would emerge in her place remained to be seen. The car drove through Chicago's streets, past familiar landmarks that suddenly felt foreign. Everything she'd known, everything she'd built her life around for the past 6 years, was crumbling. And beneath the fear and uncertainty, beneath the shock and humiliation, Isabella felt something unexpected. Relief. The safe house was nothing like Isabella had imagined. She'd pictured something sterile and institutional, the kind of temporary shelter that screamed hiding. Instead, Dimitri pulled up to an elegant brownstone in Lincoln Park, its facade warmly lit and welcoming. This is a safe house? She asked, surprised despite herself. Your father wanted you to be comfortable, Dimitri replied, opening her door. He's owned this property for 15 years. It's registered under a shell corporation that has no connection to your family name or your married name. As far as anyone knows, it's owned by a real estate investment firm. He guided her up the front steps and used a key to unlock the door. Inside, the brownstone was beautifully furnished with modern but comfortable pieces. It looked lived in rather than staged, with books on shelves and art on walls. There's a security system, Dimitri explained, showing her the panel near the door. Cameras cover all approaches. The windows are reinforced. There's a panic room on the 2nd floor, though I don't anticipate you'll need it. I'll be staying in the guest house out back. Isabella turned to look at him properly for the first time. In the bright light of the brownstone, she could see details she'd missed in the restaurant. He was probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair cut military short and a face that was more striking than handsome. His nose had been broken at least once, and there was a thin scar running along his jawline. These were marks of violence, of a life lived very differently from hers. I don't understand, she said. How did my father know? How did he know I'd need this? Dimitri's expression softened slightly. Signor Caruso is a careful man. When you married Romano, he did what any father would do. He made contingency plans. He knew the kind of man Romano was, the kind of world you were entering. He wanted to ensure that if you ever needed a way out, you'd have one. But why didn't he tell me? Isabella's voice cracked. Why didn't he warn me before I married Matteo? Would you have listened? Dimitri asked gently. You were in love. You saw the best in Romano, believed he could be different. Your father understood that. But he also understood that love doesn't always last, and that powerful men don't always remain grateful to their wives once they feel secure in their control. The truth of it made Isabella's eyes burn with tears she'd been holding back since the restaurant. She sank onto the sofa, her carefully maintained composure finally crumbling. I was so stupid, she whispered. I saw what I wanted to see. I ignored every warning sign, every moment when he showed me exactly who he was. I just kept thinking that if I was patient enough, understanding enough, perfect enough, he'd love me the way he did in the beginning. Dimitri moved to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water and a small first aid kit. He knelt in front of her, his movements professional but not unkind. May I? He asked, gesturing to her cheek. She nodded, and he gently cleaned the area where Scarlett had struck her. His touch was surprisingly gentle for such large hands. You weren't stupid, he said as he worked. You were hopeful. There's a difference. Romano is skilled at manipulation. He made you feel special, chosen. Then slowly, incrementally, he made you feel like you had to earn that feeling back. That's not stupidity on your part. That's calculated abuse on his. Isabella looked at him, surprised by the understanding in his voice. You seem to know a lot about it. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time, Dimitri said, applying antibiotic ointment to the small cut Scarlett's ring had left. I've seen many women in situations like yours. Powerful men, whether they're criminals or legitimate businessmen, often use the same tactics of control. And my father hired you to protect me from my own husband, Isabella said, the full weight of it settling on her. What does that say about my marriage? It says your father loves you very much, and that he's realistic about the world his daughter married into. Dimitri stood and cleaned up the first aid supplies. There's food in the kitchen. Your father had the house stocked. There are clothes in the master bedroom upstairs, your size. He had his assistant purchase them. And there's a laptop with secure internet access if you need to contact anyone. Anyone except Matteo, Isabella said. I'd strongly advise against contacting Mr. Romano tonight. He'll be angry, humiliated by what happened at the restaurant. Men like him don't respond well to public embarrassment. Give him time to cool down. Isabella laughed bitterly. You mean, give him time to figure out how to punish me for leaving? Dimitri's expression darkened. He won't touch you. Not while I'm here. You can't protect me forever, Isabella said. Eventually, I'll have to go back. I'll have to face him. Do you want to go back? Dimitri asked, his gray eyes steady on hers. The question hung in the air between them. Did she? Want to go back to the penthouse where she'd slowly disappeared? Back to playing the role of the perfect mafia wife while Matteo conducted his affairs and his business with equal disregard for her existence? I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to just leave a marriage to Matteo Romano. Men don't leave his organization. What makes me think I can? You're not a member of his organization, Dimitri said. You're his wife. There are laws, even in his world, about wives, codes of conduct, and your father has resources, connections. You're not as powerless as you feel right now. He moved toward the door. I'll be in the guest house if you need anything. Press 1 on the house phone and it'll ring directly to me. Try to get some rest, Mrs. Romano. Tomorrow, we'll figure out next steps. After he left, Isabella sat in the quiet brownstone, trying to process everything that had happened. Just 3 hours ago, she'd been sitting at Aurelio's, trying to disappear into the upholstery. Now she was in a safe house, under the protection of a man she'd never met, contemplating a future she couldn't imagine. She went upstairs and found the master bedroom exactly as Dimitri had described. The closet held clothes in her size, practical things like jeans and sweaters, but also professional attire, shoes, toiletries, even jewelry. Her father had thought of everything. On the nightstand, she found an envelope with her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting. Her hand shook as she opened it. Mia Cara Isabella. If you're reading this, then something has happened that required Dimitri's intervention. I'm sorry that I couldn't prevent it. Sorry that I had to prepare for this possibility at all. I know you're angry with me for not warning you about Romano before your marriage. Perhaps I should have. But I also know that you needed to make your own choices, to follow your own heart. I hoped, as you did, that he would be different, that love would be enough. What I can tell you now is this. You are my daughter, and you have the strength of the Caruso family in your veins. We built our business from nothing, survived wars and depressions and betrayals. You carry that resilience, even if you can't feel it right now. The brownstone is yours for as long as you need it. Dimitri is yours for as long as you need him. And when you're ready, not when others tell you, but when you truly feel ready, you can decide what your future looks like. Whether that means returning to Romano, negotiating a separation, or disappearing entirely, I will support you. You are not trapped, Isabella. You never were. You just needed to remember that. With all my love, Papa Isabella read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her father had known, had seen what she'd been too proud or too hopeful or too stubborn to admit, that she was slowly being destroyed by a marriage to a man who saw her as property rather than partner. She changed into comfortable clothes and crawled into the bed, expecting to lie awake all night replaying the humiliation at Aurelio's. But exhaustion took her quickly, pulling her under into dreamless sleep. Isabella woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The restaurant, Scarlett's slap, Matteo's betrayal made public, Dimitri's unexpected protection. She checked her phone and found it exploding with notifications. 53 missed calls from Matteo, dozens of texts ranging from concerned to angry to threatening, messages from friends, from Matteo's associates' wives, from people she barely knew. The incident at Aurelio's had clearly made the rounds of their social circle. One text stopped her cold. It was from Matteo, sent at 3 a.m. You've made a terrible mistake, Isabella. Come home now, and we'll forget this happened. Stay away, and I'll make sure you regret embarrassing me. The threat was clear, even through the veil of vague language. This wasn't her husband pleading for reconciliation. This was a mob boss demanding compliance. A knock on the door made her jump. Mrs. Romano, are you awake? Dimitri's voice was calm, professional. Isabella wrapped herself in the robe she'd found in the closet and opened the door. I made coffee, he said, gesturing to a tray he'd set on the hallway table. And I wanted to brief you on the situation. She followed him downstairs, grateful for the coffee even as her stomach churned with anxiety. Dimitri had set up a laptop on the dining room table, its screen showing what looked like security feeds. What situation? She asked, though she already knew it couldn't be good. Romano has had men watching the brownstone since dawn, Dimitri said calmly. They're not being subtle about it. He wants you to know you're being watched. Isabella looked at the security feeds and saw 3 cars parked at various points along the street. Men she recognized. Carlo, one of Matteo's enforcers, and 2 others whose names she didn't know, but whose faces she'd seen at family gatherings. So I'm a prisoner here just like I was a prisoner in our penthouse, she said bitterly. Not quite, Dimitri replied. Romano's men can watch, but they can't approach. Your father made certain arrangements when he set this up. This neighborhood is under the protection of the Kozlov family. The Russians? Isabella's eyes widened. The Kozlovs controlled Chicago's north side, and their relationship with the Romano family was tense at best. Your father and Victor Kozlov served together in the military, years ago, Dimitri explained. They've maintained a friendship despite their different paths. When your father bought this property, Kozlov agreed to extend his protection to it and anyone residing here. Romano's men can watch from the street, but they cannot threaten or harass you while you're under Kozlov's umbrella. My father really did think of everything, Isabella said, a mixture of gratitude and sadness washing over her. He thought of contingencies, Dimitri corrected. But what happens next is up to you. Romano will expect you to return, to apologize for the scene last night. If you do return, he'll likely make an example of your defiance to ensure it doesn't happen again. Isabella's hand moved unconsciously to her cheek, where Scarlett's mark had faded to a faint pink. And if I don't return, then you'll need to make a choice about your marriage. You can seek a separation, a divorce, or simply remain here indefinitely. Each option comes with risks. Before Isabella could respond, her phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. She answered, bracing herself. Isabella, Dio mio, are you safe? Your father told me what happened. That putana actually struck you? Despite everything, Isabella smiled at her mother's fury. Maria Caruso had never approved of Matteo, had voiced concerns that Isabella had dismissed as old-fashioned worrying. I'm fine, Mama. Papa sent someone to protect me. Dimitri, yes. Your father's been planning this for years. Isabella, You need to listen to me. Don't go back to that man. I've watched you disappear over the past 6 years, watched you become a shadow. This is your chance to remember who you were before him. Mama, it's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You're my daughter. You're a Caruso. We don't bow to men who treat us like garbage. Your grandmother survived the war, rebuilt her life from nothing. Your great-grandmother ran the family business when your great-grandfather was imprisoned. We're strong women, Isabella. Remember that. After her mother hung up, Isabella sat staring at her phone. Her family's history was full of strong women making impossible choices. Why did she feel so paralyzed now? Your mother is right, Dimitri said quietly. Not about it being simple. It's not. But about you being stronger than you realize? Isabella looked up at him. You don't know me. How can you say that? I know you walked away last night. Most women in your situation would have smiled through the humiliation, would have made excuses for their husband letting another woman strike them. You walked out. That takes strength. I walked out because I had you there to protect me, Isabella countered. What happens when you're not there? When it's just me and Matteo and his anger? Dimitri pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Mrs. Romano, I need to be honest with you about something. Your father hired me 6 months ago. For the past 6 months, I've been watching you, learning your routines, making sure you were safe. Do you know what I observed? Isabella shook her head. I watched you shrink yourself, saw you checking your phone constantly, anxiety clear on your face when Romano was late coming home. I saw you at charity events where he ignored you completely, saw you making excuses to friends for his absences. I watched a confident, educated woman slowly disappear into the background of her own life. His words stung because they were true. Why are you telling me this? Because last night, I saw something different. I saw anger. I saw someone who'd reached her limit. That woman who stood up to Romano in that restaurant. She's real, Mrs. Romano. She's who you were before you learned to make yourself small. The question is whether you're ready to let her stay. Isabella spent the rest of that first day in a strange limbo. She avoided her phone, ignored the constant buzzing of notifications, and tried to think clearly about her situation. But clarity proved elusive when every thought circled back to the same impossible questions. Could she really leave Matteo? What would that cost? And what would staying cost instead? By evening, she'd made one decision at least. She needed to see her father. Can you arrange that? She asked Dimitri. Without Matteo's men following us? Of course, he replied. Your father is expecting you. The drive to her family's home in Oak Park took them through neighborhoods Isabella had grown up in, past her old high school and the coffee shop where she'd spent countless hours studying. It felt like visiting a museum of someone else's life. Her father was waiting on the front porch when they arrived, his face lined with worry. Antonio Caruso had aged in the 6 years since Isabella's wedding, his hair grayer, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes were still sharp, still carrying the intelligence that had built a modest import business into a thriving enterprise. Mia filia, he said, pulling her into his arms. I'm so sorry it came to this. Inside, her mother had prepared enough food to feed an army, which was her way of showing love and concern. They sat at the familiar kitchen table, and Isabella felt tears threatening at the normalcy of it all. Papa, why didn't you tell me? She asked. Why didn't you warn me about Matteo before I married him? Antonio sighed heavily. Would you have listened? You were in love, Isabella, and I hoped, God help me, I hoped I was wrong about him. I hoped that his love for you would be stronger than his nature. But you knew his nature, Isabella said. You knew what he was. I knew what his family was, Antonio corrected. I knew the Romano business, their reputation, their methods. But I also knew that sometimes love can change people. Your mother changed me. Maria snorted. Antonio, you were a hothead who thought rules didn't apply to him. I didn't change you. I just made you realize that some things matter more than pride. Exactly my point, Antonio said, smiling at his wife. I hoped Isabella would be that for Matteo Romano. I was wrong. He turned back to his daughter. But I wasn't unprepared for being wrong. From the moment you got engaged, I began making arrangements. Dimitri came highly recommended through old friends. The brownstone was purchased through untraceable channels. Bank accounts were established in your name only, funded slowly so Romano wouldn't notice the movement of money. I prepared for the day when you might need to walk away. And if I want to go back? Isabella asked quietly. The kitchen fell silent. Her parents exchanged a look heavy with meaning. Then we'll support you, Maria said finally. But Isabella, you need to understand. If you go back now, after publicly walking out, Matteo will never let you forget it. He'll make sure you never have the courage to leave again." "Your mother's right," Antonio added. "Men like Romano, they can't afford to appear weak. A wife who defies them publicly is a threat to their authority. He'll either break you or discard you, but he won't simply forgive and forget." Isabella looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she still wore despite everything. It suddenly felt like a shackle. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't know how to just end a marriage to someone like Matteo. He'll never let me divorce him. It would be too humiliating, too much of an admission that he couldn't control his own wife." "Then you don't ask permission," Antonio said. "You file the papers, you enforce your boundaries, and you let him rage. Eventually, even Romano will realize that a wife who fights back is more trouble than she's worth." "And if he decides to make me disappear?" Isabella asked. "Men in his position have solved problems that way before." "Which is why Dmitri will remain with you," Antonio said firmly, "and why the Kozlov protection matters. Romano is powerful, but he's not stupid. Starting a war with the Russians over a wife who doesn't want him would be bad business. He'll bluster, he'll threaten, but ultimately, he'll let you go." Isabella wanted to believe him. But she'd seen Matteo's face when she'd walked out of Aurelio's, seen the cold fury in his eyes. He didn't look like a man who would simply let her go. They returned to the brownstone as darkness fell. Isabella felt exhausted despite having done nothing all day but think in circles. Dmitri walked her inside, checking the security system and ensuring everything was secure. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be difficult. Romano will make his move once he realizes you're not coming back immediately." "What kind of move?" Isabella asked. "Hard to say. Could be legal, trying to freeze bank accounts, claiming you've abandoned the marriage. Could be personal, turning your social circle against you, making you a pariah. Could be somewhere in between." "Comforting," Isabella said dryly. Dimitri's expression softened slightly. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Romano. This won't be easy, but you're not alone in it." After he left, Isabella went upstairs and changed into comfortable clothes. She was about to get into bed when she heard a sound from downstairs, a key turning in a lock. Her heart hammered as she grabbed her phone and pressed 1, the direct line to Dmitri. It rang once before he answered. "Someone's in the house," she whispered. "Stay in the bedroom and lock the door," Dmitri said, his voice urgent. "I'm coming." But before she could move, she heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, confident, familiar. "Isabella," Matteo's voice called out. "I know you're here. We need to talk." She stood frozen as his footsteps approached the bedroom door. How did he have a key? How had he gotten past the security system? The door handle turned, and Matteo walked in like he owned the place, which, Isabella realized with sinking dread, he probably thought he did. He looked different from the polished man at Aurelio's. His shirt was rumpled, his tie gone, and there was something wild in his eyes that she'd never seen before. "How did you get in?" she asked, hating how her voice shook. "Did you really think your father could hide you from me?" Matteo said, moving closer. "I have resources too, Isabella. People who owe me favors. It took me 3 hours to find out where this place was, and another hour to get a copy of the key." "You're not supposed to be here," Isabella said, backing toward the window. "This property is under Kozlov protection." "Kozlov protection." Matteo laughed bitterly. "You mean you're hiding behind the Russians now? My wife is taking shelter with my enemies?" "They're not my enemies," Isabella said. "And maybe if you'd treated me better, I wouldn't need shelter at all." His face darkened with anger. "If I'd treated you better? I gave you everything, Isabella. A home, money, status. I made you Mrs. Matteo Romano. Do you have any idea what women would kill for that position?" "Apparently, they can have it," Isabella shot back. "Scarlett certainly seems interested." Matteo moved so fast she barely had time to react. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You will not mention her name. You will not embarrass me further by discussing my private business." "Let go of me," Isabella said, trying to pull away. "Not until you listen," Matteo growled. "You're coming home. Tonight. You're going to apologize for the scene you caused, and we're going to present a united front. Do you understand?" "I understand that you're hurting me," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "And I understand that if you don't let go right now, you're going to regret it." "Or what?" Matteo sneered. "You'll call your bodyguard. You'll run to Daddy. Face it, Isabella, you have nowhere to go. No matter where you run, I'll find you. You're mine, and you'll always be mine." The bedroom door exploded inward, the lock shattering under the force of Dimitri's kick. He moved into the room with a lethal grace, a gun in his hand pointed directly at Matteo. "Remove your hand from Mrs. Romano," Dimitri said quietly. "Now." Matteo's grip tightened for a moment, a challenge in his eyes, but then he looked at Dimitri's face, at the absolute certainty there, and slowly released Isabella's arm. "You're making a mistake," Matteo said to Dimitri. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what happens to people who threaten me?" "I know exactly who you are," Dimitri replied, his gun never wavering. "Matteo Romano, head of the Romano crime family, currently under federal investigation for racketeering, suspected of ordering at least 7 murders in the past 3 years, known for using intimidation and violence to control territory and personnel." He paused, letting that sink in. "But do you know who I am, Mr. Romano?" Matteo's eyes narrowed. "You're Caruso's hired gun, some mercenary playing bodyguard." "I'm Dmitry Volkov," Dimitri said, "former Spetsnaz, former FSB, and currently under contract to protect Mrs. Romano from all threats, including her husband." Isabella saw recognition and something like fear flash across Matteo's face. Volkov. She'd heard that name before, whispered in Matteo's study when he thought she wasn't listening. The Volkovs were legends in certain circles, Russian operatives who'd transitioned into private security, known for their effectiveness and their complete lack of mercy toward those who threatened their clients. "You hired a Volkov to watch your wife?" Matteo said, looking at Isabella with something between disbelief and rage. "Do you have any idea what that signals to the rest of the families? It looks like you're planning something against me." "I didn't hire anyone," Isabella said. "My father did, 6 months ago, because he knew I might need protection." 6 months ago, Matteo repeated slowly. 6 months. Before Scarlett. Before any of this. Your father was planning this betrayal for months? "It wasn't betrayal," Isabella said, finding her voice growing stronger. "It was insurance, and it turns out it was necessary. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Matteo looked between Isabella and Dimitri, and Isabella could see him calculating, trying to find an angle. But there was none. He was alone in a house under enemy protection, facing a trained killer who had every legal right to shoot him for breaking in and assaulting Isabella. "This isn't over," Matteo said finally. "You can hide behind your father's money and Kozlov's protection for now, Isabella. But eventually, you'll have to face reality. You're my wife. That means something in our world. You can't just walk away." "Watch me," Isabella said. Matteo's jaw clenched. He straightened his jacket, trying to regain some dignity. "You have until the end of the week to come home. After that, I'll assume you've chosen to dissolve our marriage, and I'll act accordingly." "What does that mean?" Isabella asked. "It means," Matteo said, his voice cold, "that you'll no longer be under my protection. Every debt you owe, every person who might have a grudge against the Romano family, they'll see you as fair game. You'll be vulnerable in ways you can't imagine." "She'll have my protection," Dimitri said. "One bodyguard against every enemy I've made over the years." Matteo smiled cruelly. "Good luck with that." He walked toward the door, then paused. "I loved you, Isabella. I really did. But you forced my hand. Whatever happens now is on you." After he left, Isabella's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, shaking with adrenaline and shock. Dimitri lowered his weapon and moved to her side, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "He's right, isn't he?" Isabella said. "About me being vulnerable without his protection?" "Partly," Dimitri admitted. "The Romano name does shield you from certain threats. But Mrs. Romano, you need to understand something. The biggest threat to you has always been Romano himself, not his enemies. Him." "How do you know that?" Isabella asked. Dimitri hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Because I've been investigating your husband for the past 6 months. Your father didn't just hire me for protection. He hired me to understand exactly what kind of danger you were in." He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos. Isabella in the penthouse, taken from a distance. Isabella at lunch with friends. Isabella at charity events. All surveillance photos, all showing her utterly unaware she was being watched. "These were taken by Romano's own people," Dimitri explained. "He's been having you followed for over a year, not for your protection, for control. He wanted to know where you went, who you saw, what you did every moment you weren't directly under his eye." Isabella felt sick. "Why?" "Because he knew you were smart enough to eventually see through him. He was preparing for the day when you might try to leave. These photos, this surveillance, it was meant to make it impossible for you to have any privacy, any autonomy. It was meant to reinforce that he owns you. But he doesn't, Isabella said, and hearing herself say it made something click into place. He doesn't own me. No matter what he thinks, no matter what power he has, he doesn't own me. No, Dimitri agreed. He doesn't. Isabella stood, using the wall for support. What do I do now? He gave me until the end of the week. You make a choice, Dimitri said. You can go back, try to make peace, accept that your life will be what it's been, controlled, monitored, slowly suffocating. Or you can fight. You can file for divorce, establish your independence, and face whatever Romano throws at you with the knowledge that you're not alone. And you'll help me? Isabella asked. Even though it will be dangerous? Even though Matteo just threatened that I'll be a target? That's what I'm here for, Dimitri said simply. Isabella looked at him, this stranger who'd appeared in her life at exactly the right moment, who'd protected her without hesitation, who was now offering to stand between her and one of Chicago's most dangerous men. Why? She asked. Why risk your life for me? My father's paying you, yes, but there are easier ways to make money. Dimitri's expression shifted, becoming less professional, more human. You want the truth? Always. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've protected politicians, businessmen, criminals, victims. Most of them are just jobs. I keep them alive, collect my fee, move on. But sometimes, I meet someone who reminds me why I started doing this work in the first place. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I grew up in Russia, in a household where my father treated my mother the way Romano treats you. I watched her disappear over the years, watched her shrink herself to avoid his anger. When I was 16, she finally found the courage to leave. He killed her 3 days later. Isabella's breath caught. Dimitri, I'm sorry. I swore then that if I ever had the power to prevent that from happening to someone else, I would use it. Your father hired me to protect you, yes. But I would have done this for free, Mrs. Romano, because I see my mother in you, and this time, the story ends differently. The raw honesty in his voice broke something open in Isabella. She'd spent so long feeling alone, feeling like no one truly understood what she was going through. But Dimitri understood. He'd lived it from a different angle, but he understood. Call me Isabella, she said. If we're going to do this, if we're going to fight Matteo together, you should call me Isabella. Isabella, he repeated, and something in the way he said her name, with respect, with recognition of her as a person rather than a possession, made her feel seen for the first time in years. Then let's do this, she said. Let's fight. The next morning, Isabella called a divorce attorney her father had recommended. Susan Chen was a shark in Armani, known for representing women in high-profile divorces from powerful men. She arrived at the brownstone with a briefcase full of documents and a no-nonsense attitude that Isabella found both intimidating and reassuring. Mrs. Romano, Susan said, spreading papers across the dining room table. Let me be clear about what you're facing. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't need to prove wrongdoing to end your marriage. However, given your husband's resources and connections, he will make this as difficult as possible. How difficult? Isabella asked. He'll tie up assets, claim you're not entitled to marital property, possibly file countersuits alleging abandonment or infidelity. He'll use every legal delay tactic available. A straightforward divorce could take years. Years, Isabella repeated, her heart sinking. However, Susan continued, you have advantages. Your father established separate property in your name before the marriage. The brownstone is held in trust, completely separate from marital assets. And if your husband has been having an extramarital affair, which the incident at Aurelio suggests, we can use that in settlement negotiations. I don't want his money, Isabella said. I just want out. Susan smiled thinly. I appreciate the sentiment, but this isn't about want, Mrs. Romano. This is about protection. If you walk away with nothing, you look weak. Other families will see you as vulnerable. You need to extract a settlement that demonstrates you left on your terms, that you have resources and independence. Over the next 3 hours, Susan walked Isabella through the divorce process. They documented everything, the affair with Scarlett, the assault at the restaurant, Matteo's threatening behavior at the brownstone, the surveillance photos Dimitri had uncovered. They built a case not just for divorce, but for Isabella's complete separation from the Romano family's influence. I'll file the papers tomorrow, Susan said as she packed up her briefcase. Once they're filed, your husband will be served within 48 hours. That's when things will get ugly. After Susan left, Isabella sat alone in the dining room, staring at the papers she'd signed. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Such clinical language for the end of everything she'd thought her life would be. Dimitri appeared in the doorway. "Second thoughts?" "1,000 of them," Isabella admitted. "But I'm going through with it anyway." "That's courage," Dimitri said. "No," Isabella replied. "Courage is what my mother did when she raised me to be strong. Courage is what my grandmother did when she rebuilt her life after the war. This is just survival." "Sometimes survival is the bravest thing you can do," Dimitri said. That evening, Isabella's phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Isabella." The voice was female, tentative. "It's Julia." Julia Marchetti, Matteo's sister. They'd been close once, before the marriage had soured, before Isabella had become just another piece of furniture in the Romano world. "Julia," Isabella said carefully. "Why are you calling?" "Because I heard about Aurelio's, about what Scarlett did, about what Matteo didn't do." Julia's voice was tight with emotion. "Isabella, I'm so sorry. My brother has become someone I don't recognize." "He's still your brother," Isabella said. "You don't have to apologize for him." "Maybe I do," Julia replied. "Maybe we all do. The family who enabled him, who looked the other way while he treated you like you didn't matter. Isabella, I need you to know something. Not all of us agree with how Matteo has handled this." "What does that mean?" Isabella asked. "It means that if you need help, real help, there are people in the family who will support you. My cousin Luca has always liked you. My Aunt Rosa thinks Matteo's been a fool. We're not going to stand in your way if you decide to leave." The offer stunned Isabella. She'd assumed the entire Romano family would close ranks against her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Matteo thinks he can bully you into submission. He thinks the family name and his reputation will be enough to make you come crawling back. But he's wrong, Isabella. You deserve better than what he's given you. And some of us are tired of watching good people get destroyed by this family's arrogance." After they hung up, Isabella relayed the conversation to Dimitri. He looked thoughtful. "It's interesting," he said. "Romano is losing support within his own family. That makes him more dangerous. He'll feel like he has to prove himself. But it also means you have unexpected allies." "I never wanted allies," Isabella said. "I just wanted a husband who loved me." "I know," Dimitri said gently. "But sometimes we don't get what we wanted. We get what we need to survive." The divorce papers were served to Matteo at his office on Thursday morning. Isabella knew the exact moment it happened because her phone immediately started buzzing with calls from his number. She ignored them all. By afternoon, the first salvo arrived. A courier delivered a thick envelope to the brownstone. Inside were legal documents, Matteo's response to the divorce petition. He was contesting everything, claiming Isabella had abandoned the marriage, demanding she return to the marital home, and freezing all joint accounts. "He's moving fast," Susan said when Isabella called her. "This is designed to put financial pressure on you, to make you feel like you can't afford to fight him." "Can I afford it?" Isabella asked. "Your father's trust covers your legal fees, and you have access to accounts Romano doesn't know about. You'll be fine financially, but Isabella, this confirms what I suspected. Your husband isn't going to let you go easily." That night, things escalated. Isabella was in the kitchen making tea when the power went out. The entire brownstone went dark, and the security system's backup alarm started blaring. Dimitri was through the door from the guest house within seconds, gun drawn. "Stay where you are," he ordered, moving through the darkened house with practiced efficiency. Isabella heard him on the phone, speaking rapid Russian. Then the backup generator kicked in, and dim emergency lighting illuminated the house. "Someone cut the main power line," Dimitri said when he returned to the kitchen. "Professional job. They knew exactly where to cut to disable the primary system without triggering immediate police response." "Matteo," Isabella said. "Most likely. It's a message. He can reach you whenever he wants, security or not." "So what do we do?" Isabella asked, hating the fear in her voice. "We upgrade," Dimitri said. "I've already called in reinforcements. By tomorrow, this house will have a secondary security system that's completely independent of the main grid, and you'll have additional protection. More bodyguards. People I trust. Former colleagues who owe me favors. Romano wants to play games? Fine. But he's going to learn that you're not an easy target." True to his word, by Friday afternoon, the brownstone had been transformed into a fortress. 2 additional men arrived, Ivan and Alexei, both former Russian military, both carrying themselves with the same lethal competence as Dimitri. New cameras, motion sensors, and backup systems were installed. The message was clear. Isabella Romano was under serious protection. But as the weekend approached, Isabella felt the walls closing in. She'd gone from one kind of prison, her marriage to Matteo, to another kind, this protected house where she couldn't leave without an armed escort. "I can't live like this," she said to Dimitri on Saturday evening. "I can't spend the rest of my life hiding in a fortress." "You won't have to," Dimitri assured her. "This is temporary, until Romano accepts that you're not coming back. Once the divorce is finalized, once he moves on, things will calm down." "And if he doesn't move on?" Isabella asked. "If he decides he'd rather see me dead than divorced?" Dimitri's expression hardened. "Then he'll have to go through me first." The threat, or promise, hung in the air between them. Isabella looked at this man who'd inserted himself into her life, who'd appointed himself her protector, and felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't attraction exactly. Or maybe it was, but mixed with gratitude and respect, and the dawning realization that Dimitri was the first man in years who'd treated her like she mattered. "Why haven't you asked me about it?" she said suddenly. "Asked you about what?" "About why I stayed so long. Why I let Matteo treat me the way he did. Most people wonder. I can see it in their eyes. They think I was weak or stupid, or that I liked the money too much to leave." Dimitri set down the security tablet he'd been monitoring. "I don't wonder about that because I already know the answer." "You do?" "You stayed because you loved him. Because you believed in the promises he made. Because leaving someone like Romano isn't a simple decision. It's a death sentence if you do it wrong. You stayed because you're human, and humans hope things will get better even when all evidence says they won't." His understanding made Isabella's throat tight with emotion. "I feel like I wasted 6 years of my life." "You didn't waste them," Dimitri said. "You survived them. There's a difference." On Sunday evening, everything changed again. Isabella was upstairs reading when she heard raised voices from downstairs, Dimitri and someone else, arguing in Russian. She went to the stairs and saw a woman in the living room, well-dressed and beautiful, gesturing animatedly while Dimitri responded in low, controlled tones. When the woman saw Isabella, she switched to English. "So this is her? This is the woman you're risking everything for?" "Katya," Dimitri warned. "Don't." But Katya was already moving toward the stairs. "Do you have any idea what you've cost him? The contracts he's turned down? The jobs he's refused because he's too busy playing bodyguard to a mafia wife?" "Katya, that's enough," Dimitri said firmly. "Who are you?" Isabella asked. "I'm his partner," Katya said. "Or I was, until you came along. Until he decided that protecting you was more important than the business we built together." Isabella looked at Dimitri, confused. "I don't understand." "Katya and I run a security firm together," Dimitri explained. "We've been business partners for 5 years. She's upset because I've been unavailable for other contracts while working your case." "Upset?" Katya laughed bitterly. "We've lost hundreds of thousands in revenue, Dimitri. I've had to turn away clients, had to explain that my partner is too busy with a personal project to fulfill our obligations." "This isn't a personal project," Dimitri said. "This is a job, like any other." "Is it?" Katya challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks very personal. The way you talk about her, the way you've dropped everything else to focus solely on her protection, that's not professional, Dimitri. That's personal." Isabella felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I think I should give you 2 privacy." "No," Dimitri said. "Stay. Katya is leaving." "Am I?" Katya said. "Fine. But Dimitri, when this ends badly, and it will end badly, don't come crying to me. You're violating every rule we established. Don't get emotionally involved. Don't put one client above all others. Don't risk the business for personal feelings. You're breaking all of them." She left, slamming the door behind her. In the silence that followed, Isabella and Dimitri looked at each other across the distance of the living room. "Is she right?" Isabella asked quietly. "Have I ruined your business?" "No," Dimitri said firmly. "Katya's angry because she doesn't understand. This case is important." "But is it personal?" Isabella pressed. "Be honest with me, Dimitri." He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Isabella had her answer. It was personal. Somewhere between protecting her and watching her find her strength, it had become personal for him. "I need to know," Isabella said, descending the stairs. "I need to know if you're here because my father's paying you or because of something else." Dimitri ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him before. Does it matter? Yes, Isabella said. Because if this is personal, if there's something between us beyond professional obligation, then I need to know what I'm dealing with. I'm trying to leave one complicated situation. I can't walk into another. You're not walking into anything, Dimitri said. I'm your bodyguard, that's all. But the way he said it, the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes, told Isabella he was lying. To her, or to himself, or both. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He answered it in Russian, his expression growing increasingly grim. When he hung up, he looked at Isabella with something like dread. What is it? She asked. That was Kozlov's people. There's been an incident. Someone tried to breach one of his properties tonight, a warehouse on the north side. The guards captured one of the intruders. What does that have to do with me? The intruder was carrying photos of you, Dimitri said. And a detailed dossier on your routines, your security, your protection detail. Someone is planning something, Isabella. And based on the level of detail in that dossier, they're planning it soon. The interrogation room in Kozlov's warehouse was exactly what Isabella had imagined a place like this would be. Concrete walls, a single hanging light, and the kind of cold that seemed to seep into your bones. She stood in the doorway with Dimitri beside her, watching as Viktor Kozlov questioned the man tied to a chair in the center of the room. The intruder was young, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was in over his head. His face was bruised from the capture, but what struck Isabella most was the terror in his eyes when he saw her. Mrs. Romano, Kozlov said, turning to acknowledge her presence. He was a bear of a man, built like a boxer with silver threading through his dark hair. I apologize for bringing you here, but I thought you should hear this directly. Hear what? Isabella asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Kozlov gestured to the captured man. Tell her. Tell Mrs. Romano who hired you. The young man's eyes darted between Kozlov and Isabella, clearly calculating his chances of survival. Finally, he spoke, his voice cracking. Scarlett Voss. She hired me to gather information on you. Said she needed to know your routines, your security, where you'd be vulnerable. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Scarlett? Why? She said Romano wouldn't do what needed to be done. Said he was too soft on you, that he'd eventually take you back and she'd lose everything she'd worked for. The man swallowed hard. She wanted options, ways to make you disappear that wouldn't trace back to Romano. She wanted me dead, Isabella said flatly. I don't know, the man said quickly. She never said that explicitly, just said she needed leverage, needed a way to convince you to stay away permanently. Dimitri's hand moved to the small of Isabella's back, a gesture of support. What else did she tell you? She said Romano was weak where his wife was concerned, that he still had feelings for her despite everything. She thought if Mrs. Romano was just gone, then Romano would move on, marry her, make her legitimate. Isabella laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. She actually thinks he'd marry her? She doesn't understand men like Matteo at all. Apparently not, Kozlov agreed. Miss Voss has been quite busy. My people have been monitoring her for the past week at your father's request. She's been meeting with some unsavory characters, people who specialize in making problems disappear. Does Matteo know? Isabella asked. Does he know what she's planning? We don't believe so, Kozlov said. Romano may be many things, but he follows certain codes. Having his wife murdered, even an estranged wife, would violate those codes. It would make him look weak, out of control. Isabella looked at the terrified young man in the chair. What happens to him now? That depends on you, Kozlov said. He attempted to breach my property, gathered intelligence on someone under my protection. Normally, that would have severe consequences. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Isabella understood what Kozlov was really asking. Should this man die for his involvement in Scarlett's plot? Let him go, Isabella said. He's just a hired hand, not the real problem. Kozlov raised an eyebrow. You're certain? He could go straight back to Miss Voss. Warn her that her plan has been discovered. Good, Isabella said. Let her know we're coming. Back at the brownstone, Isabella paced the living room while Dimitri and his team planned their next move. The revelation about Scarlett had shifted everything. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about survival. We need to tell Matteo, Isabella said. Whatever he's done, whatever he is, he needs to know that his mistress is planning to kill me. Are you sure about that? Dimitri asked. Romano isn't exactly a reliable ally right now. He's still my husband, Isabella said. And more importantly, he has codes he lives by. Scarlett trying to kill me behind his back. That's a betrayal he won't tolerate. She pulled out her phone and for the first time since leaving Aurelio's, called Matteo directly. He answered on the first ring. Isabella. His voice was cold. Changed your mind about coming home? I need to meet with you, Isabella said. Alone. It's important. I don't take orders from you anymore, Matteo said. You made your choice when you walked out. Scarlett is trying to have me killed, Isabella said, bluntly. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow at noon at Millennium Park, or I'm taking that proof to the FBI and letting them know that your girlfriend is a murderer in waiting. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, I'll be there. Millennium Park was crowded with tourists and locals enjoying the crisp autumn afternoon. Isabella sat on a bench near Cloud Gate, watching people take selfies with the giant reflective sculpture, trying to remind herself that normal life still existed outside her chaos. Matteo arrived exactly at noon, flanked by 2 of his men. He looked tired, Isabella noticed. The polished veneer he usually maintained had cracked slightly, revealing the stress beneath. You have 5 minutes, he said, not bothering to sit. Isabella handed him a folder containing photos of the captured intruder, printouts of Scarlett's meetings with known criminals, and a transcript of the interrogation. She watched his face as he reviewed the evidence, saw the disbelief transform into cold fury. Where did you get this? He asked. Kozlov's people caught one of Scarlett's hired men trying to gather intelligence on me. He told them everything. Matteo's jaw clenched. I didn't know. Isabella, you have to believe I didn't know she was planning this. I do believe you, Isabella said. Because as much as you've hurt me, as much as you've failed as a husband, you're not a man who operates through proxies. If you wanted me dead, you'd do it yourself. He flinched at her words. I don't want you dead. I've never wanted that. But you didn't want me alive either, Isabella said quietly. Not really. You wanted a wife who existed only when convenient, who disappeared when you needed her to. You wanted control without the burden of actual care. Matteo sat down heavily beside her. You're right. I failed you. I got so caught up in maintaining power, in looking strong to everyone else, that I forgot the one person I should have been strong for was you. It was the closest to an apology Isabella had ever heard from him, and it made her throat tight with complicated emotions. What will you do about Scarlett? She asked. What do you think I'll do? Matteo's voice had gone cold. She tried to have my wife killed behind my back. She thought she could manipulate me, control me through her bed tricks and empty promises. She was wrong. Don't kill her, Isabella said, surprising herself. Matteo looked at her sharply. You're defending her? After she tried to have you murdered? I'm not defending her. I'm saying that her death would solve nothing. It would make you look reactive, out of control. It would give the other families ammunition to use against you. Isabella met his eyes. Handle her legally. Have her charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Let the system deal with her. Since when do you trust the system? Matteo asked. Since I realized that becoming like you would destroy what's left of my soul, Isabella replied. They sat in, silence for a moment, watching tourists mill around Cloud Gate. Finally, Matteo spoke. The divorce papers. You really want to end this? Yes, Isabella said simply. Because of Scarlett? Because I failed you? Or because you never really loved me at all? Isabella considered the question carefully. I loved you, Matteo. I loved the man I thought you were, the man you pretended to be when we first met. But that man was an illusion. The real you, the man who could watch his mistress slap me and do nothing, who could threaten me when I tried to leave, who saw me as property rather than partner. I can't love that man. And if I changed, Matteo asked, if I became the man you thought I was? It's too late for that, Isabella said. Too much has happened. Too much trust has been broken. We can't go back, Matteo. We can only move forward separately. He nodded slowly, accepting the finality in her voice. I'll sign the papers. Whatever you want, property money, I'll agree to it. And I'll deal with Scarlett quietly, legally, like you suggested. Thank you, Isabella said. But Isabella, Matteo added, his voice carrying a warning. After this, you're no longer under my protection. The Romano name won't shield you anymore. Are you prepared for that? I have my own protection now, Isabella said. And my own name. I'm going back to being Isabella Caruso. Something like regret flickered across Matteo's face. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry I wasn't the husband you deserved. So am I, Isabella said. She stood to leave, and Matteo reached out, catching her hand. For what it's worth, You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't appreciate it until it was too late." Isabella squeezed his hand once, then let go. "Goodbye, Matteo." As she walked away, she didn't look back. Dimitri was waiting at the edge of the park, and when she reached him, he fell into step beside her. "How did it go?" he asked. "He's going to sign the papers," Isabella said. "It's over. Really over." 3 months later, Isabella stood in the kitchen of her father's brownstone. Her brownstone now, officially transferred into her name as part of the divorce settlement. She was making coffee when Dimitri appeared in the doorway, returned from his morning run. The dynamics between them had shifted over the past months. He was still her bodyguard, still maintaining professional boundaries, but something had changed. The way he looked at her now carried warmth along with the watchful protection. The way she felt when he was near had evolved beyond gratitude into something more complicated. "Your divorce was finalized yesterday," Dimitri said. "I saw it in the court records this morning." "I know," Isabella said. "Susan called me last night. It's official. I'm no longer Mrs. Romano." "How do you feel?" Dimitri asked. Isabella thought about it. "Free, scared, relieved, sad, all of it at once." She poured coffee for both of them, and they sat at the kitchen table in comfortable silence. This had become their routine over the past months. Morning coffee, quiet conversation, the easy companionship of two people who'd been through war together. "What will you do now?" Dimitri asked. "Now that you're free?" "I've been thinking about that," Isabella said. "My father wants me to come back to the family business, but I think I need to do something different. Something that's mine." "Like what?" "Susan mentioned that she could use someone with my background, someone who understands the world of powerful men and their wives. She thinks I could help other women navigate divorces from dangerous husbands." Dimitri smiled. "You'd be good at that." "And what about you?" Isabella asked. "Will you stay, or do you have other clients waiting?" "Katya has the other clients covered," Dimitri said. "We worked things out after that night. She understands now why this case was important to me." "Why was it important?" Isabella asked, her heart beating faster. "And don't tell me it's just professional obligation." Dimitri set down his coffee cup and looked at her with those steady gray eyes. "Because somewhere between protecting you and watching you find your strength, I started to care about you. Not as a client, as a person. Dimitri, I know the timing is terrible," he continued. "You just got out of a bad marriage. The last thing you need is another complicated relationship. So I'll stay as long as you need protection, and then I'll step back. I'll give you the space to figure out who you are outside of being someone's wife." Isabella reached across the table and took his hand. "What if I don't want you to step back?" "Isabella, you're vulnerable right now. You're confusing gratitude with—" "Don't tell me what I'm feeling," Isabella interrupted. "I've spent 6 years having a man tell me what I felt, what I needed, what I should want. I know my own mind, Dimitri, and I know that what I feel for you is real." "Even if it is real," Dimitri said gently, "you need time. Time to heal. To discover who you are on your own, to build a life that isn't defined by a man, any man, including me." He was right, Isabella knew. She needed time to be herself, to remember who Isabella Caruso was before she became Isabella Romano. But she also knew that what she felt for Dimitri was different from what she'd felt for Matteo. It was built on respect and trust and genuine partnership rather than illusion and control. "So we wait," Isabella said. "I take time to heal and find myself. And then, when I'm ready, we revisit this conversation." "When you're ready," Dimitri agreed. "If you still feel the same way." "I will," Isabella said with certainty. 6 more months passed. Isabella threw herself into work, helping Susan with divorce cases and starting her own small consulting practice. She reconnected with friends she'd lost during her marriage, rebuilt relationships that Matteo's controlling nature had damaged. She went to therapy, processed the trauma of her marriage, learned to recognize the patterns that had led her into that situation in the first place. And through it all, Dimitri was there, not hovering, not controlling, but present. A steady support who respected her boundaries while making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. The threat from Matteo's world had largely faded. Scarlett had been arrested for conspiracy and was awaiting trial. Matteo himself had moved on, focusing on his business and, according to Julia, becoming slightly less terrible in the process. The Romano family had accepted the divorce with surprising grace, and Isabella occasionally still received friendly texts from Julia and other family members who'd always liked her better than they'd liked Matteo's behavior. On a spring evening, almost a year after the incident at Aurelio's, Isabella invited Dimitri to dinner. Not at the Brownstone, but at a small Italian restaurant in her old neighborhood, neutral territory, away from the house that had been her sanctuary and her cage. They talked about everything and nothing, work, family, plans for the future. And as the evening wore on, Isabella realized something important. She was happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way she hadn't been in years. "I'm ready," she said as they walked back to the car. "Ready for what?" Dimitri asked, though the small smile on his face suggested he knew. "To revisit that conversation from 6 months ago, the one about what's between us." Dimitri stopped walking and turned to face her. "And what's your conclusion?" "My conclusion," Isabella said, stepping closer, "is that I spent 6 years with a man who made me small, and I've spent the last year with a man who helped me become myself again. That's not gratitude, Dimitri. That's not confusion or rebound or any of the other things you worried about. That's real." "You're sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything," Isabella replied. He pulled her close then, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Not to a place, but to herself, to the person she'd always been but had forgotten how to be. When they finally pulled apart, Dimitri rested his forehead against hers. "I've been waiting a long time to do that." "Was it worth the wait?" Isabella asked. "Every second," he replied. "Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.